Okay. And I will invite another speakers of today's panel, Professor Emin ERGEN, Medical Consultant at Gloria Sports Arena. Welcome to the panel. Professor GREGSON, Head of Performance Science and R&D, Aspire and Qatar Football. And Professor Michael Lindeman, Performance Director at WLC23 Sport.
Hepinize selamlar. İyi öğleden sonraları. Hoş geldiniz oturuma. Çok teşekkürler davetiniz için organizasyon komitesine, Gloria adına teşekkür ediyoruz. Emre ve ben bu oturumda daha çok moderatör, soru soran, işleri biraz kızıştıran gibi davranacağız. Öncelikle konuşmacılarımızı tanıtacağız. Ondan sonra kendilerine söz vereceğiz. Arkasından da tartışmalara geçeceğiz. Şimdiden sorularınızı hazırlayın. Zor sorular sormaya çalışın. Çünkü çok değerli iki konuşmacı var. Çok deneyimli iki konuşmacı var bizlerle birlikte. Özellikle takımlarda uzun süre çalışmış. Onlara bilimsel destek vermiş. Atletik performans koçluğu yapmış isimler. Zaten tanıyorsunuz ismen onları. Ama ben bir kere daha ilk konuşmacıyı tanıtmak istiyorum. Lütfen ilk konuşmacıyı tanıtan slaytı koyabilir miyiz? Sunumda olacaktı. Aşağıdan da görebilir. Evet, teşekkürler. Bir tane ilerleyelim lütfen. Bir tane daha ilerleyebiliriz. Şimdi öncelikle şöyle bir soru karşımıza çıkıyor. Spor bilimleri, bilim, futbolda performansın neresinde? Bununla ilgili bir araştırma yapılmış. 2018 yılında yayınlanmış. Ve antrenörler spor bilimlerinden ne bekliyorlar diye bir soru sorulmuş. 3 değişik ülkeden katılımcılar var bu araştırmada. Bir tanesi Groningen Üniversitesi'nden, diğerleri Norveç'ten ve Birleşik Krallık'tan. Acaba antrenörlerin, teknik direktörlerin beklentileri neler? Bununla ilgili 29 soru sorulmuş kendilerine ve 24 yıldan daha fazla deneyimi olan bu kişilerin cevapları alınmış. 5 noktada daha fazla bilgiye sahip olmaları gerektiği ortaya çıkmış. Bunlar da zihinsel beceriler, fiziksel beceriler, grup dinamikleri, yüklenme ve kapasiteyle ilgili monitorizasyonla ilgili bilgiler ve nihayet yetenek gelişimi ile ilgili konular merak uyandırıyor teknik direktörlerde. Ama bununla ilgili spor bilimlerinin kendilerine katkıları konusunda da 5 noktada engel oluştuğunu dile getirmişler. Kulüplerin tutuculuğu, finansman sıkıntıları, bilim adamlarının futbola yönelik sınırlı bilgileri, uygulamanın zorluğu, bilimsel olarak ortaya çıkan verilerin uygulamadaki yetersizliği ve bir de zamana ait sıkıntılar. Şimdi bu konularda her ikisinin de çok büyük deneyimleri var. Birazdan dile getirecekler. İlk konuşmacı olarak ben bu deneyimlerden bahsetmesi için Warren'a söz vereceğim. Bir slide ilerleyelim lütfen. Profesör Warren GREGSON, spor bilimcisi, doktorasını bitirmiş. Egzersiz fizyolojisi alanında Manchester Metropolitan Üniversitesi'nde çalışmış. Halihazırda Manchester'a başladı bir hafta kadar önce. Ama daha çok başında, daha önceki birikimleri arasında Middlesbrough'da çalışmış. Daha sonra Katar, biliyorsunuz, Dünya Kupası'nı düzenledi ve buraya gelinceye kadar Katar'da son 10-15 yıldır çok ciddi bir çalışma yapıldı. Akademiden başlayarak A takımına kadar giden, ki Asya Kupası'nı aldılar, Körfez Kupası'nı aldılar. O çalışmaların içerisinde bilfiil bulundu. Çok laboratuvar gibi bir çalışma gerçekleştirdiler. Kendisi 25 yıldan daha uzun süredir bir deneyime sahip. Bilimle teknolojinin karışımını futbola yansıtma konusunda çalışıyor. Dünya çapında bu konuda deneyimleri var. Konsültanlık yapıyor. Aynı zamanda birçok teknik konuyu piyasaya sunan firmalara da danışmanlıkta bulunuyor. Ben şimdi daha fazla uzatmadan Warren'a sözü bırakıyorum. Floor is yours, Warren.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to the organising committee for the invitation to be here to this fantastic event. I think it took nearly 20 years since I was last here in Antalya. I think it's the World Congress in Science and Football. It's really nice to be back and great to be with you. I guess my first task is just to give you a brief summary of I guess my career experience to date. And as the the introduction there said, I've recently just swapped the nice sunshine of the Middle East for the cold and rain of Manchester. So I just about to embark on a new project, kind of heading up a research and innovation partnership between the Institute of Sport in Manchester and Manchester United. So once I leave Antalya, that's going to keep me busy for the foreseeable future. So going back, I guess, a few years, I guess now I've been, I guess, involved in elite football in different capacities for over 25 years. My journey really, I guess, started in 1997, and bizarrely, the next speaker in the next panel, Chris Barnes, was my first real mentor and boss, as we call them in England, in football. And in 1997, I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to undertake a PhD, an industrial PhD, which was a collaboration between Middlesbrough Football Club in the Premier League at the time and the university. And at that time, Chris and the club were embarking on a huge performance and medicine project. Probably at the time, investment, probably the biggest in the Premier League. It really was a huge project. And I would spend 5 years with Chris and the team there, really building out, a performance science program. There was a huge new training facility developed. And then obviously the role was to embed strength and conditioning, across the gym and the pitch, nutrition, biomechanics, so the full plethora really of scientific support services to the club. And obviously around that we were also doing research and development as part of that. So that was a huge project, and that was really my first kind of experience in the game, and that would take me through to the early 2000s. And then from 2002, I think, to 2012, I pretty much moved a little bit more towards the kind of academic research side. I was really kind of interested in lots of areas at the time, and I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to go to the Research Institute in Liverpool, which at the time was led by a guy probably many of you know in the audience, Professor Tom Riley, who was really one of the kind of the founders of our discipline. So it was an amazing opportunity really to work there for the best part of a decade with Tom and, so many leading guys in different areas. And obviously that was a really intense research and innovation period for myself, but also fully engaged in industry. And there at the time we were working with some really early technology companies. If there's anybody in the audience as old as me, they'll remember a company called Prozone. I think they're called Stats Perform now. So we were involved really in that transformation from the manual ways of tracking what players were doing in matches, which was really designed by Tom in the 70s, through to digital semi-automated approaches where we see today cameras in the stadium. So this was just starting to evolve in the late 90s, and we were starting to get involved in that transition and helping to validate that system. So we really started to work with technology and a whole raft of projects there. And probably the biggest kind of, I guess, industry work I was engaged in then, I'm very fortunate, was with Manchester United, and that, I guess, was during the Sir Alex Ferguson era, which obviously was an incredibly successful era for the club. And I started to work on a range of R&D projects there for the club from about 2006 through to 2012. You know, developing infrastructure, and we were looking at recovery, we were looking at injury prediction, a whole raft of areas. So that kept me busy for 5 or 6 years, and then in 2012, I was given the opportunity to go to Qatar just after they'd been awarded the World Cup. A collaborator of mine at Manchester United, Valter Di Salvo, who was Sir Alex's, I think his first fitness coach actually, he'd moved to Qatar to head up a huge performance project. And so I left for Qatar in 2012 and remained there until the end of December this year. So obviously I enjoyed myself there. And the project in Qatar was really unique for many reasons. More so that we effectively were building a performance program essentially from scratch. And it was a huge collaboration between the Football Association in Qatar and Aspire Academy. Aspire Academy, effectively, from a football perspective, is the youth end of the National Football Federation. So obviously those organisations are central to it. The league, which is the Qatar Stars League, and also Aspetar as well, which is obviously, many of you know Aspetar as a world-leading FIFA Excellence Centre. So it was really a huge collaboration of those stakeholders, and really we're building from scratch. And probably my first 4 or 5 years were essentially back on the field. We were introducing modern technology at the time, such as GPS monitoring. So we were starting to introduce that to the national teams, to the league. We installed the optical tracking systems across all the stadiums. So really innovative, sports science at the time, particularly in that region. And then that continued to layer up, and probably maybe 5 years into that, we started to turn our attention to the new High Performance Centre. I don't know if any of you have been to Qatar and seen the training centre, and it's an amazing facility that was built. And really my role then gravitated towards that, where we started to, look at how we're going to manage the data science, data engineers, and building the sports science infrastructure across the system. And I guess what was quite unique about that is that we were managing really information for around 25 teams, from Qatar national team all the way down to the youth team, across the entire league, and also the teams in Europe which Qatar invested in. So it was a huge technological challenge as much as a scientific challenge, and that really was a project that took us all the way through to the 2022 World Cup, which was really kind of the end game for myself in Qatar as a project. And as I alluded to at the beginning, then it was on to the sunny UK, and here we are today. I think that probably gives you a snapshot of my career to date, I think.
Bir sonraki slayda, evet. Bir sonrakine daha geçelim, bunu atlayalım. Bir sonraki konuşmacımız Michael Lindeman. Aslında bize çok yabancı olmayan birisi. Yaklaşık 2 ay önceye kadar Antalyaspor'da çalışıyordu. Henüz ayrıldı oradan. Kendisi çok deneyimli. Ta 90'lardan bu yana futbolun içinde olan, futbol biliminin içinde olan bir isim aslında. UEFA lisansları var kendisinin birçok. Aynı zamanda bir profesör olarak çalışıyor orada. Kurslarda eğitimler veriyor. Ve birçok büyük kulüpte deneyime sahip. Antalyaspor'un yanında İngiltere Premier Ligi'nden, Alman Bundesliga'dan ve diğer birçok ligde birçok tecrübesi var. Aynı zamanda Luis Suarez gibi, Dimitar Berbatov gibi birçok ünlü isimle birlikte çalışmış bir koç ve birçok kupa kazanmış bir isim. Ve kendisi özellikle spor biliminde önde gelen isimlerden bir tanesi. Özellikle verinin sporda etkili bir şekilde kullanılmasında o son yıllarda özellikle çok fazla gelişim sağlayan bu teknolojinin aslında en başından itibaren süreçte bulunmuş bir isim. Çok fazla deneyimi var. Kendisi de Şu an burada çok detayına benim giremeyeceğim aslında bir ekosistemden bahsediyor çalışmalarında. Aynı zamanda DNA üzerine çalışmalar yapmış bir isim. Okay. Lindeman, the floor is yours. You can...
It's up to me now?
Yeah, it's up to you now.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I was in Antalyaspor 6 weeks ago, and for private reasons I had to leave the club, but I didn't know that I would be back in 6 weeks already, and they all welcomed me like a family, so thank you for this. Yes, it's the same as Warren. I've been in this business for 25 years, I think. And when I started as a performance coach, this job didn't exist. So I remember my first meeting with Rinus Michels. Maybe you don't know him, but he was the Dutch national team coach. And he was asking me, yeah, but what are you doing? Are you with a doctor? Are you with the coaches? What do you do? So this was the start, and maybe Warren had the same experience. And then the focus was more on the training. And then the training, if the training, it gives you success. If you didn't have success, you differentiate the training, you altered the training. And then hopefully you had success. Now, in all my years and getting to bigger clubs, this training shifted a bit to the athlete now. So we're now focusing more on the athlete with a lot of data. Big clubs have 7 guys like me and Warren now walking around behind computers and everything. And but still, I still had problems, because when I was at Ajax, for example, it was me alone. When I started in Saudi Arabia, it was me with a stopwatch and a pen. And then at Ajax, I had an assistant, and we had Excel sheets. And then this coach was before me. He had a lot of hamstring injuries, and he was doing a lot of squats and everything. And then I learned already that time is a major factor in what we do. Because we want to test this, we want to test this, we want to test this, but you don't have the time to do it correctly. Because they were doing squats, for example, and they tried to get the power moment for these guys. And that took 30 minutes to test each player, to find the right weight for this guy. And then I had to find out how many repetitions this guy had to do. So, and being by myself, I left it. So I didn't do weight training. And strangely enough, we didn't have any injuries whatsoever. So everybody asking me, what are you doing with Alex? What are you doing? All of a sudden we don't have any injuries. And I said, nothing. And they said, well, yeah, what did you do? I said, no, nothing. I just left it. And then I went to the Bundesliga, and then we had this lactate testing, because the Bundesliga loved lactate testing. And then I had, for example, Ivica Olic, and this guy ran the most. And after the game, they always had to sit on the bike to get this lactate down. And this guy was having a high lactate in his blood. He was sitting on the bike 30 minutes after the game still, and he still had the same lactate. So, and this guy, after 2 days, he was running the most again. So, also, you know, in Holland we say, to measure is to know. But I like to switch it around. First know what you like to measure, and then start to measure. Because we are measuring everything now, from jumps to sprints to everything. And then I was at Fulham, and then every 2 weeks we had a company coming over with a presentation. Oh, we have this new equipment, we have this new thing. And we all watched it. But after 5 minutes, you already know from experience, this is not going to work. This is too much things involved for this piece of information. And at one time, there was a company, and they came with DNA. And then I thought, hey, this is something I can use. Because DNA you were born with and die with. This never changes. And then I started to use DNA. And then it gave me a lot of information to start with. Because we had, in Egypt I did it, for example. Did you know that 99% of all my players were lactose intolerant? And they were eating only yogurt and hummus and eggs and everything. And then you ask them, okay, well, how do you feel in the game? Yeah, but I have this all my life. Then you have a certain gene. You can have the type from your mother, your father, or a mix. We had at Fulham, we had players who had 90% endurance genes and 10% power genes. But we also had 2 players who had 90% power genes and only 10% endurance genes. But at that moment, we did the same with them. So I started to alter the training. Also a thing was injury risk. You have certain genes in your body that build inflammation. And you have certain genes that slow down inflammation. So, if you have a player who have a high injury risk, that means if you do, in the training, for example, you do 1 against 1, 2 against 2, a lot of stopping and going and turning, and this gets inflammation on the tendons, Achilles, and everything. Some players have the right genes, their body takes care of it itself. Other players, they have the opposite genes, it just makes the inflammation more. So if we knew this, before we did this training, these guys had to go to the physio and get prepared, another preparation for this kind of training. So this kind of data started helping me, because we did a lot of hamstring, for example. Hamstring injuries, that's one of the biggest problems we have. And then we find out, for example, that we did all these tests, and then we had one player who had 90% power genes, and he had 2 hamstring injuries after 5 minutes in the game. And it was 2 times against his old team. This was also very interesting. So you can do a lot of data testing, but also the mental part, the hormonal part of a player. And I would like to shift more towards this side to get the basic of the player. Because there's also a gene that determines if you are a warrior or a warrior. So a warrior means that if you say there's a war, this guy is already running with his gun. But you also have a warrior. That the guy thinks, oh, there's a war. Should I go? Where are they coming from? This guy is worrying. So these kind of things are very interesting to me. And I think one of my advantages is that when we started, we had to develop ourselves, because there was nothing. Now you have educations, and if you do a certain education, that they teach you something. And you go to your club to teach what you have been taught. And I'm mostly autodidact, so I've been all around the world. I've different sports. And I'm shifting more towards the player, because for me it's all about readiness and doing a training less. So I'm trying to get an eco profile of this player, more than looking at training volume. And of course this is very important. This is very important because this has to be specific for this player. But I'm shifting now not more to high intensity runs and speed and everything, because I just saw the results. I think Mbappé and Messi, they were the 2 the best players in the tournament. I think they run 8 kilometers every game. So we are looking at he has to run 12, he has to run 11, he has to run. No, it's about the player first. For me, it's about the DNA. And I don't know how Warren thinks about this. Maybe he can say something about what he thinks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the DNA side is obviously, you know, really interesting, and I know there's a lot of work that's been done in this area and ongoing. It's not something I've really got much experience with, but you know, from one perspective, it completely makes sense. You know, if you can, you know, in terms of profiling the player, if you can get that level of information, then you know you'd be crazy not to look at that type of information. But I do agree with Michael in terms of the overall kind of focus on the, like, you know, it's called the mental side of the game is hugely important. And really interestingly, there was a very big conference in Qatar pre-World Cup, and Arsene Wenger was talking much about how, you know, maybe over the last 2 decades we've seen so much evolution of the player from a physical perspective, but maybe now the evolution is going to come from upstairs, from the brain side of things, and so that really probably ties in with what you're talking about as well, in terms of maybe the innovation, the focus is going to move upstairs a little bit more.
Yes, because and that player, that specific player, that got 2-time hamstring injury after 5 minutes. So normally you get at the end of the game, you're tired, you know, the hamstrings are getting tired, and you have to do a sprint. But this guy had it after 5 minutes, and 2 times against his old club. So this tells me that there's mentally, and you see it more and more now, that players are coming out, that they have fear, anxiety, stress. The stress is enormous with the media, and everything with Instagram and social media. A lot of pressure on the families and everything. So I think that, from the experience, I would like to go more to monitoring the player's mental state and wellness state than how much he is running in a training session.
Michael, just a question after your short intro about your work. Actually, to what extent you would rely on DNA in terms of predicting the injuries? Do we still keep the old-fashioned methods in predictions? For example, also in terms of the performance analysis, or we have to avoid all these things and just rely on the DNA? Is it an additional information or the main feature in terms of predictions in the future? What do you think?
No, I think it's just a piece of the puzzle. But I think we have to make the puzzle as small as possible. And now, because as I said, when I went to Ajax, I was alone. And when I went to Germany, to HSV, I had 1 assistant. And then I came to Fulham, and I had 7 fitness coaches. So this was a whole different world. And then you know, if you are alone, and this is what the ecosystem, for example, is about. You need a small dashboard, because I'm only interested in this and this. And if you have 2 or 3, okay, you can broaden your views a bit. If you have 7, okay, you have more information. But sometimes, and I had this a lot with the coaches, and Warren probably also with the older ones, that they rely on the eye. And sometimes they are correct. And I had sometimes I had to go to a player and I said, all the data gives that you're tired. He said, no, I'm okay. I had a day off. And then the coach said, well, have a talk with him because he looks tired. And he said, no, I can train. I said, but what did you do yesterday? I said, yeah, I went looking for a new house with my wife all day. I visited 6 houses. I went to bed at 8 o'clock. So he was mentally, but he wanted to train. And then we did some kind of exercise, and he lost, and he was 190, and he lost an air duel against somebody from 170, and he fell down and he twisted his ankle. So these are the things that sometimes you have to look around the data and rely on your guts. I don't know what you think, Warren.
Warren, in continuing his topic, so we are the generation started with the old style heart rate monitors, then GPS systems were emerged afterwards. Now we have the sensors actually giving data about the core temperature in the body. So what are all these and to what extent the coaches are utilizing the data you are providing them? Are they happy about that? Of course, it varies from country to country, the culture to culture, but in general, what's your experience?
Yeah, it's the big question, isn't it? It's, and you know, it's probably something we could discuss all day. But yeah, I think it massively varies from country to country, from club to club. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, you know, resources is important, but I think as a whole, the football industry, one thing we all share is we're just going through a huge period of disruption because, you know, technology and data, like every industry, is impacting football. And so what we have at our disposal now, you know, what's disposable now in terms of, you know, resource is huge. And so, you know, I think we all probably share similar frustrations in terms of, you know, what's going to give us the best insights in the different facets of what we're doing. And I think that's a challenge we're all sharing, whether it's, you know, which type of trackers to use, whether there's more, you know, physiological types of measures that we can do. And I think, you know, from my own experience and certainly where we are now, when I talk to colleagues in other clubs and other federations, I think we're all working along similar lines. Probably the biggest challenge is working out how to manage all the information efficiently. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have so far, because if you spend all your day moving data around, then actually you're not really using it. So I think the challenge now is to make sure that what you're actually using is rapidly available and allows you to have important conversations within your staff, with the coaches, rather than wasting time moving information. So I see too many organizations spending way too long shifting data, making reports, and actually very little time using the information, which to me it defeats, you know, the purpose of having that technology. So, you know, I think there's some of the things that we really need to get a hold of, is how we're using all that information.
Yeah, so talking about data, so we're collecting a lot of data, as you said, Michael, but I think, I mean, it's kind of frightening to play with the big data. I mean, it's kind of starting to become a data science, or so it's, I think, important that we should know what we should be collecting and not collect everything and then try to get out of this data, but we should know what we should be collecting and then just focus on all these parameters. And so we have seen a lot of companies now, you know, coming up with the outlet management systems, all these data. But do you think, Michael, this is, you know, going where this is going and how it should be, you know, in the end? I also know that you have your company, Audit Systems, right? And
yes, it was. Yeah. When I was alone, I was interested in only a couple of things. And when I went to bigger clubs, and then I went into the Premier League, and then all of a sudden I had this, like in United, I had all these departments. And all of a sudden I didn't have to do the warming up anymore because I had 7 guys doing it for me. And so I became an assistant manager more. And so I walked into the medical room, for example, and these guys were all behind their computers. And then I said, okay, what do you have? What kind of system do you have? Oh, we have the biggest system. It's unbelievable. Very expensive. It can do A, B, C, D, E. I said, oh, okay, great. Can it do F? He said, yeah, I can do F, but then we need another guy in because we don't have enough time, but we can, if you can do this. I said, okay. And yeah, we can give you a password so you can log in from your own computer, you can watch it and everything. And every morning I will come up and give you a review. I said, okay. Then I walked into the data guys, the data analysts. They were behind the computers. I said, okay, what are you guys doing? He said, no, well, we have this software program. It's unbelievable. It costs a lot, but it can do A, B, C, D, E. I said, okay, can it do F? He said, yeah, but we need another guy in. So we need an extra guy. So instead of 6 already doing, we need 7. But we can give you a password, and everything you want, you can look up yourself. And everywhere it was the same. Everybody, they had a great system. But all I was interested in the morning, was a dashboard with 25 pictures of the players when they filled in their RPEs every morning. I wanted to see directly on my screen if it's green, red, yellow, boom, boom. I wanted to see if they test their urine, if they dehydrated, hydrated, and everything. Were they ready or not? I wanted to only see this. I didn't want to see all this stuff behind it. Then I was with Martin Jol. He just wanted to see green or red. Can he train or not? But the sport director, he wanted to see, what is this guy costing me? Is he injured? What is this guy's premium? What is this guy? How much is his contract? And who is the guy after him? So the scouting report. So everything, they wanted to see a different dashboard. And but they all had a system which can do 100,000 things, and they tried to do it, and we're going to use it because we paid for it, but actually you only need A, B, maybe E, for example. And this is what intrigued me. So I started to try to find a way to build a system inside out, not outside in. So not somebody, this is the program, you have to buy it. Because it's the same, I told you this example, when you buy a car, the guy who sold you sits next to you and he starts to explain everything to you from the car. And then you drive away, and after 3 years, you give back the car. And then you find out that you only want to know if there's enough gasoline in the tank, if my air conditioning is working, is there enough, is my music good, and is my seat warm enough. This is the only thing I need. I don't need all this, but I'm paying for 20 other things, and I don't even know. Because I have to read the manual, I'm not reading the manual. So I'm trying to find out, if you're a small club, you want to start with this, and then you build on to this. Because I want every system, that's the ecosystem, to be fluently, from the academy to the scouts, to the commercial side and everything. And everybody from this data has his own specific dashboard. And this is what I tried to build.
Actually, this question to you both. Yeah. Not every club has the same privilege being able to afford all these systems, the very expensive systems. How long does it take to become a coach to understand the overreached, overtrained athlete from his eyes?
Probably one for you to answer, I would say. You're the coach.
Well, in the early days, they say he has to puke. And if he falls down, that's enough. But now, every coach now, I think, when they study, they have their licenses, they get the knowledge to have like a basic periodization, and which you cannot go wrong. And I mean, you cannot go wrong. Average. So the older players will stay out of injuries, but probably the younger players will not get really better. This is, and then win games and get to a better club.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I'll come back to that one. I just wanted to go back to a really interesting point of yours earlier, which you jumped on, and I think I hear it a lot, and there was a little bit of kind of a tremor in your voice when you talked about, are we just, is this data getting out of hand? Is it becoming, all about statistics? And I don't think about it that way, because if we think about the medical side, for decades we've accepted that we need a foot doctor, we need a back doctor, we need a general practitioner, we need a surgeon. So we have all these different, and rightly so, they're trained in very specific areas. And I think, we're not talking about football here, but every industry is being impacted by technology and data. So you have to react to that. You sink or swim. So as an industry, if we put resource aside for one moment, we just have to accept that if you're going to get competitive advantage in the industry, you're going to have additional expertise in your recruitment and your performance and medical team. It's just, and we shouldn't be scared of that. It's just in the end, you need different expertise to handle and produce what you're going to need. You can't get away from that. So we shouldn't be scared of it. And I don't think it's becoming, you know, statistics are important, but I come back to a really good point here, which Michael made, which is, you know, the best people in any industry are able to simplify things. You know, if you read a scientific paper that's written beautifully, yep, there's real, you know, knowledge and experience and talent into writing a very clear manuscript. So, you know, I think, coming back to what you were saying about dashboards, it's almost like an iceberg effect. You know, the coach doesn't need to see everything beneath the surface. He doesn't need to talk with the data engineer. He doesn't need to talk with the data scientist. He just needs to see very simple insights at the surface on the dashboards that impact what he does. And that's the challenge for us all. You know, so I think we should kind of try and get away from this. Is it becoming too data intensive? Every industry is becoming data intensive. So if you don't react to it, then, you know, you lose that competitive advantage. So we should embrace it. It's just that we're going to need to have new people in the group that can help us to manage that. And in the long term, will be a good investment. So I think we need to think, it's just natural evolution of the game. And every industry is going through it. I'm sure you do. I have friends who work in pharmaceuticals. I have friends who work in marketing. I have friends who work in petrochemicals. Data. They're having to employ new types of people to help. And football's the same, unfortunately.
The other question comes to my mind is about the artificial intelligence. Do you think that the coaches are threatened by these developments, that at some point the artificial intelligence is going to substitute a coach in the future?
This one for you.
Not in my lifetime. Simple answer. Yeah, no.
No, I think football is emotion, and especially in Turkey, and and with artificial intelligence, it will become robotically, and the emotion will disappear. So I don't think they will ever allow this.
Salondan herhangi bir soru var mı acaba? Bakıyorum. Belki aklınıza gelen soru ya da yorum olabilir değerli dinleyicilerden. Gürhan Hocam sanki var mı? Yoksa İrem Hanım? Sebahattin Hocam, sen ilgiyle dinliyorsun.
Teşekkür ederim hocam. Sağ olun. Thank you very much. I want to ask about I study sports economics. I want to learn about the ecosystem. What do you think about the trainer ecosystem, this revenue and the club supports and the money? What do you think about the ecosystem?
No, you see that the club is now there's a lot of fan base, there's a lot of social media, there's a lot of commercial, there's TV rights and everything. But for me the ecosystem is, and that's why I say inside out instead of outside in, is that whenever we go somewhere, we start with nothing. And then the only question I ask you is, wouldn't it be great if? So, and then I will let you give me the answer. So you would say, ooh, wouldn't it be great if I could see this data combined with this data? And then we just work on it. So instead of these companies which have great things, giving it this to you and say, okay, well, but this is only a piece of the puzzle. And we would like an ecosystem to to get all the departments together to get you the best result commercially and find out where you can get the money. And if you don't have an academy, for example, it has to come from somewhere else, and all these kind of things. So you could build an ecosystem based on the club's ideas, the budget you have, the fan base you have. So it's based on what you have, and there you build the ecosystem step by step, instead of getting one thing which you have to buy for 100,000 and you have to use it for at least 3-4 years, and you only use 25%, and the other 50% you're on a Zoom call because they have to explain it to you 10 times and you don't understand it because you only want to know this or this, and then we only take this and you only pay for this, and the others you don't need, and then you build your own ecosystem inside out. I don't know if you any.
Yeah, you know, and I can almost kind of extend that a little bit. It was really nice to see the ecosystem concept discussed, because again, my role now is very much focused around research and innovation, and you know, I've always really liked the MIT model of innovation. And when you look at the model, it's very much about kind of key stakeholders, you know, being the, you know, private organizations, government, universities, entrepreneurs, you know, startups, you know, all these, irrespective of what industry you're in, they all form part of an innovation ecosystem. And you know, I think we need to get better at that in the football industry. It really is interesting, obviously, listening to the opening session this morning with the CEO of the Turkish FA was talking about, okay, yeah, resource, we need to resource the clubs and we need to look at the business model. And I think we need to get better as football clubs at being open to innovation, because typically football clubs are very secretive. You know, but that's a really old way of thinking about developing and innovating. And again, if we look at other industries, you know, whether it's Silicon Valley, Kendall Square, all these big innovation hubs around the world, all these different big corporations, organizations, they have these external innovation centers, and you gain far more than you're giving away. You know, and I've experienced that myself from university collaborations, from collaborations with technology companies. So, you know, universities are a great example. Often universities can be quite abstract. I've worked in one, I'm a professor myself, and we have lots of solutions to nothing. We don't really know what we're trying to solve. But out on the other side, you know, often clubs have lots of problems they need solving. So unless you actually open up lines of communication and start talking, you know, you need to bring the problems and solve, you know, and solutions together. So I think, again, the both within the club, but outside the club, clubs need to get better at being open to innovation. There is so much, you know, intellectual capacity out there today that can help what we do inside of clubs, particularly if you don't have big resources. You know, if you really, resources are tight, that's where you really need to try to build your innovation ecosystem, and you'll be amazed at the collaborations that you can form.
Yeah, well, for example, if I can just... Okay.
Hi, Kazim from Onside Assist Sports Management. Just a quick question.
Biraz yüksek sesle lütfen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. This is a question for Michael and Warren. In your field, we know the last 10 years, or what you've mentioned, has how it's developed, and you've touched base basically on what your expectations are or how it's going. But realistically, it's difficult to say as you go along just how much improvements will be. In your view, what does the next 10 years hold? Just how far can this science go? Do you have a vision of how far that's going to go when you think about it?
Well, you saw that the game developed a lot. So from high-intensity runs, transitions and everything. Now you saw at the World Cup that it shifted a bit more to the tactical part. So people just standing on their own half. So you don't have that high intensity, only the transition is more now. I think you will see it go up and down, and it's like to people like me and Warren to keep it simple, to simplify it, and it will go more to fan-based things that they can they can see everything, and I think this will develop more. But I think me and Warren would like to keep it more simple, because yeah, he still has two legs and 2 arms, and the field is still the same, and we still play 90 minutes. So I don't see on the physical part huge changes. I see more commercial, economic style changes more.
I'm glad you say that, and before we go on to Warren's answer with regards to this, a lot of people think that it's actually getting easier, but what you say, keeping it simple, I think it is getting more and more complicated as time goes by, and I'm just not sure where the game is heading as it gets complicated. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think already, many big clubs, many organisations are playing catch up already, trying to work out how to handle all this information. So I'm sure over the next 10 years we'll all be chasing our tail as always. So that won't go away. And it's clear, look at the technology stack from this World Cup. We've already moved on from checking what the player's running in a game to now having 29 body parts, so we can look at pose information. So what's the tech stack going to look like at the next World Cup in 4 years? So it's going to get more and more granular. So, again, at some point we're going to have to get better at managing and automating this information to even be able, to get those insights from it. So it's really hard to predict where it's going to go, but certainly from on the ground, there is so much to do already with the insights that with the data that we've got already. There's so much to do to get a handle on, to explore, to understand. So if you said to me there'll be no more technological advancements in the next 10 years, I'd be quite happy, because I've got more than enough to play with at the moment.
Thank you.
Hello, hi.
Merhabalar, benim ismim İrem, spor eczacısıyım. Öncelikle tüm katılımcılara katkılarınız için teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Benim sorum şu olacaktı, sportif performans belirleyen antrenman, beslenme, hidrasyon gibi konular için belirli standartlar oluşturmuş durumdayız. Ama özellikle sportif performans elit seviyelere çıktığı zaman ve daha üst düzey, optimumun da üzerinde bir performans hedeflediğimiz zaman daha bireysel yaklaşımlara ihtiyaç duyuyoruz. Bireysel sporlarda bu bireysel yaklaşımları göstermek daha kolay gibi geliyor bana. Ancak futbol gibi sporculara benzer antrenman programlarının uygulandığı veya benzer yaklaşımlar sergilendiği sporlarda DNA'ya göre olabilir, farklı perspektiflerden olabilir. Bireysel yaklaşımları nasıl sergiliyoruz, bunu merak ediyorum.
I think it's a great question. I think nutrition is certainly an area that I think has massively innovated over the last, 5 or 10 years. And I've been really fortunate to my department in Liverpool over the years, and in the UK, there's some wonderful nutritionists doing some great work. And it's almost come full circle in some ways, I think, with nutrition. When you see some of the best practitioners and people working across innovation and delivery, they've almost gone from years ago where we're moving to players were just inundated with supplement. Where actually now it's come full circle. Actually, they've gone back to going back to real foods. So the first stage is eat real, proper foods. Teach the players to be able to, players doing cooking lessons, so they're understanding what real food looks like, and then you look at supplementation. So I think that's been a real move, where, I know Premier League players that have been taking cooking lessons, and obviously I guess COVID accelerated that. So I think that's been a real innovation. I think you only have to walk into any Premier League training facility at lunchtime and you see the quality of food is absolutely incredible. So I think the way food's presented and how it's sourced by the people delivering it, I think that's moved on hugely. So I think there's massive amounts of innovation that have gone on in nutrition and will continue to do so. But again, I think it's it's almost, the top people, I think, are trying to simplify it. I think the other area is really interesting, actually, because I had a conversation with a colleague who recently joined us in Qatar from an English Premier League team. And I was just saying to him, how many chefs do you have at your club? And they had 9 chefs. I was thinking, nine chefs, head chef, different chefs focusing in different areas. So again, the level of expertise and innovation that's gone on behind the scenes on the cooking perspective has just gone, through the roof. So I think nutrition has moved on hugely, and who knows what's coming next on that side of things.
Yes, again, I had this with this DNA stuff, because you could be very high sensitive in carbohydrates and very low in fat. I'm very low in fat, but very high in carbohydrates. And actually, if you look at yourself, you know it. But our time is up. But because sometimes, a nutritionist tells you have to eat this and this and this. My nephew, for example, he's a professional. He's very low sensitive in fat and very low in carbohydrates. This kid can eat everything, and he's still like this. Other guys who are very sensitive in carbohydrates, just look at the pasta, and they already gain half a kilo. And it's the same with caffeine. Caffeine is now hugely used in sports because it's an enhancer. But you can be a slow metabolizer or a fast metabolizer. If you don't know this, you will take the caffeine, your espresso, an hour before the game. If you are slow, it doesn't use you. But on the way on the bus after the game, and you go on the bus, you go home. This guy is karaokeing because he's upper, and somebody has to take it 4 hours before a game because they are a slow metabolizer. So these kind of things also, I think, and that's why, and it's the same with the, for example, with the ecosystem. And if an investor wants to buy a club, they are looking at the commercial side. Okay, this is giving me this is giving me this, and the fan base and everything. But we always like to look at the club and look at this infrastructure and look at the players, because this player now is worth 50 million. But if he's not looking after, if your staff isn't good enough, this player is worth 10 million after 2 years. So you're losing 40 million. So we are already trying to advise investors not to only look at the outside in, but inside out again. So, but nutrition is the engine.
I think Emre has a burning question. Have you?
I think the question was mostly like the nutrition is maybe easier to control and individualize. But what about the other parameters, like physical parameters? Because it's a team sport and maybe we don't have time to practice individually all the players separately. So maybe it's more easier with the nutrition, but the physical part, sometimes we don't have time as athletic trainers to individually train each athlete, each player. So how should we handle that?
No, I always gave an advice that to a coach, you just do what you want to do tactically. And I think every performance coach now knows exactly, if you play 11v11 on a big pitch for 10 minutes, this will give you this data. This amount of high intensity, this amount of total distance. If you play 1 against 1, you won't achieve any total distance and everything. But he wants to do this because he wants to have implement tactical aspects. As a performance coach, you know exactly. You do what you do, and this is what I learned in the Premier League. And we will just do top-ups. As soon as you have these eco-profile of your players, and that meant, for example, that the guy who had 90% of fast twitch power genes, this guy was doing like 40-meter runs and coming back 40-meter runs. The guy who had 90% endurance, he was doing more laps because this does only hurt him. So you do top-ups and let the coach just think about this technical work?
I think for the sake of the next session, in order not to steal their time, we need to wrap up. Do we have any last words regarding the topic? Just looking at Warren and Michael.
Hello. I've got one more question. Sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me. We need to close it. Sorry about that. Sorry. But you can catch them in the break, so please. Thank you very much, guys. Really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you for all the motivational speaks, and I would like to invite Cansel Kemiksiz for give the certificates for you guys. Thank you. Thank you for sharing memories. It's all real lifetime experiences. And can we take a picture before you leave? It's gonna be okay. Thank you. Thanks again. And we're about to move the last panel of today, and we're going to have a 10-minute break. Before that, would love to announce the last panel. It's the subject, the use of modern technologies to improve performance. And moderator will be Dr. Emre Ak, Head of Sports Medicine and Athletic Performance Center at Gloria Sports Arena. And speakers will be Chris Barnes, Consultant Sports Science at UEFA, Associated Professor Barış Gürol, Athletic Performance Coach at Beşiktaş Football Club, and David Van Nienhoff, Commercial Director, SCI Sports. And thank you for SCI Sports for the main sponsor of this last panel. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Huh? Oh.